being able to observe what's happening on the inside while simultaneously being aware of the information that we're receiving from the five senses. That's really it. And being able to do that for long periods of time, continuity, we turn it into a continuous practice, and then integration takes place. Self-remembering, the remembering of the psyche. Remember, not remembering like it's a memory, but remembering like taking all the different members and putting them all together. We can call it self-integration or consciousness integration. It comes from the continuity of self-observation. So meditation helps, cold water helps, breathing certainly helps, but having the tools to turn the consciousness on in the moment and doing that continuously in an unbroken chain, that's really what it comes down to. It's esoteric psychology.
You're listening to A New Way of Living with Dan Voss, inspiring you to a new life of breathwork, cold therapy, nature, and plant medicine. In this week's episode, my guest is Reed Wasser. Reed is a lifelong practitioner and teacher of breathing, movement, stillness and meditation, biohacking, and consciousness. Reed is also a certified Level 2 Wim Hof Method instructor, which we'll get into further in our conversation today. Reed, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining me.
Great, Dan. Good to be here, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. I know we have so much in common, and we have connected in the Cold Showers Clubhouse room, which is a daily conversation on Clubhouse that we join in pretty much every morning to talk about cold showers and all of the benefits of cold exposure and breath work and Wim Hof Method. And I mentioned in your bio, you're a certified Wim Hof instructor. So I always appreciate when you join in on the room and provide your expertise and your knowledge on the subject matter. So cool, man. Let's get right into it. I'd love to start off, just because it's how we connected, is through Wim Hof Method and cold exposure and breath work. I want to hear a little bit more about that backstory of how you got into Wim Hof Method and cold exposure and breathing and what that has done for you in your life.
Yeah, so, I've studied esoteric teachings as soon as I could think. I mean, 7, 8 years old, I was asking people about, what religion means and what it all means. Both my parents are black belts in karate, and in their lineage of karate, you meditate before and after you work out. So I was meditating as soon as I could walk because I was being taught karate by my parents. In my teens, I joined some esoteric orders, some mystery schools. And in my 20s, I was Gnostic and taught from 20 to 30, like 5 nights a week, Kabbalah, esoteric psychology, alchemy, all the esoteric philosophies, Eastern and Western. And during that time, I was studying also with a Tibetan Lama, and I was getting really into Tibetan Buddhism. And I kept, coming across this idea of Dumo. Dumo is basically the original method. When these yogis would go out in the snow and practice breath work and cold exposure, and there's all these great ancient, texts involved with Dumo. It's an ancient tantric teaching, and I always wanted to learn it, but I could never really find anybody to teach me the actual ins and outs of Dumo yoga. And when I was maybe, 6 or 7 years ago, I guess 6 years ago, I came across Wim Hof on Instagram, and I was like, what the heck? Who is this old Dutch guy he's doing Dumo? And it freaked me out. I was like, well, what the hell? And so I watched the documentaries, and, I think that same day I was like, I got to figure out how to do this. Where is it at? And I found it, and I started doing it. And in a week, actually within a couple of days, I was so impressed. My body was just feeling different. My mind was becoming clearer. I was actually going through a difficult time of my life when I found the method. I had just moved up to Seattle from LA. I'm an entrepreneur. I had business partners and employees, and it was a very stressful time, working with them. And I'm in Seattle. I had no friends, and nobody I could talk to. So I was very alone, and it was cold, and I started getting sick. I started getting allergies, and I was looking for something, that would really work, something from the inside. I practice meditation. I've taught meditation since my 20s, still do. I still have students from way back in the day. I teach martial arts and movement and all of these different modalities. But what the heck, like I wasn't able to I wasn't tapping into my health. I wasn't feeling right. I was getting depressed. I was getting anxious. I was getting, strange allergies all the time. So I did the method, and in like a couple days, everything changed.
Wow.
And so I just haven't stopped since then. I've done it every day since 2016, the beginning of 2016.
I love that. Yeah, it sounds
So
like
in
we have.
2018, in 2017, I was like, I want to go deeper with the practice. And so I did advanced workshops with local instructors in Seattle. Matt Soul, who's a great guy. He's a level 3 instructor. He's been doing it, as soon as Wim Hof started teaching it publicly. I think he was there, with Wim. And so I took a bunch of courses with him, and he's great. I learned so much from him. And I was like, I need to keep going deep. And the logical next step was to become an instructor. So in 2018, I studied with Wim
Wow.
at his academy, and became a certified instructor.
What was one of the biggest lessons you learned from Wim? You had been exposed to the practice. You had been doing it on your own, learning about it, and incorporating into your life, which I'm sure you learned so much from all of that before you went over and trained with him. But that time that you had with him, whether it was a week or so, what was one of the biggest lessons or biggest takeaways that you got from being with Wim, seeing how he worked, how he did the practice? Was there anything that stood out to you there?
Yeah, it's his ability to flow. And he does. It's like the Chinese, like the Taoist philosophy of Wu Wei, action without action. And Wim really embodies this concept. And it's forget the concept. I mean, he's embodied, and you can feel it. The man he is who he is. Regardless, his practice, it's like he practices without practice. There's no mechanicity there. I don't see. He's not. He's not like the stimulus response mechanisms that the rest of us are. He acts completely from his presence. So I've never seen him do the practice, because I think that I don't see when he's not doing the practice. It's like, even just the way he breathes, the way he jokes. You see him. He's always moving and kind of dancing and singing, and it's an embodiment of the movement and the breathing. Even the way he speaks. When he speaks, he's showing you how to breathe.
Yeah, I love that. And then I've seen some of his videos on social media of him playing guitar, and singing, and that reminds me very much of when you talk about how he has movement and dancing. And when I watch him or listen to him playing that music, it's that same kind of flow that he embodies throughout his lifestyle.
Oh yeah, he keeps himself charged up all the time, constantly, and you can feel it.
It's really cool.
You feel it.
Yeah, and what a great example, to practice what you preach. He's not out there just talking about it. He's actually living it every single day, throughout his whole day. It's really cool. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Oh yeah, he's a great teacher.
Yeah, it's really cool.
He really is. And a normal guy. That's the best thing about it. He's just a human. He's a humanoid animal.
Yeah, I would love to meet him one day. It's a goal of mine to meet him and possibly train with him someday. It would be really cool. Somebody I look up to.
Oh yeah.
And the reason why I say that is it sounds like we have similar story of how we were introduced to the method at the right time. For me, I was introduced at a time where it was not a great spot in my life. Before COVID, I was just not living a very healthy lifestyle, physically, mentally, spiritually. I was also going through a breakup, and I was introduced to the Wim Hof Method around that time where I didn't know what else to do. where we're told so many different things, right? In terms of how to eat healthy and sleep better and get movement in. And then I came across this method. And for me, it was like the biggest change, the quickest change for my health. And again, at a time where I felt like I needed it the most, where I was down on myself, where I was not loving myself, where I was not taking care of my health. And by doing that, it's simple. It's breathing. It's stepping into the cold. It's stepping into nature. It's stepping outside of that comfort zone. And it taught me so much. It taught me how to fight that adversity or overcome a challenge, and how to love myself. So I know we've gotten a lot out of it. And then the other cool part is it just kind of broke open this world of breathing and breath work. And I know one thing you're really big into is human consciousness. So I'd love to tap into that a little bit more in our conversation is human consciousness. How can we better access that human consciousness that we have?
How can we better access human consciousness? Consciousness is the intelligence, it's perceptive intelligence. So it, in my experience, it has the nature of light. It's expansive and it reflects. And when it reflects, it brings information back to itself. Awareness is consciousness, and even unawareness, subconsciousness, is consciousness, is a form of intelligent perception. And to tap into, consciousness through the experience of a human is about awareness. It's about becoming aware. And awareness happens in the moment. It doesn't happen through thinking or through emoting or being in a mood or instinct. Being conscious, being awake is a moment by moment experience. And that's the the real point of it, the crux of it is to tap into human consciousness and through the human experience, is to be in the moment, is to be embodied, is to be able to perceive the inner and outer experience. The internal experience is the world or the worlds of thoughts, emotions, instincts, the inner planes, what's happening on the inside of the body. And at the same time being conscious and being aware of the information that we're receiving through the five senses, right? Smell, taste, touch, sight, hearing, which is information that's coming into the human machine from the external world. So to tap into the human consciousness or consciousness from the human experience, we have to be present and simultaneously aware of the information that's coming from the external world through the five senses and the inner life, which is, thought patterns, moods and emotions and instincts and movement. So
that's a really neat way of looking at it. What would you say, what are some of the main ways that we can become more present and become more aware? For me, it's been meditation and breath work and getting into the cold. Has that been the same for you? And are there any other modalities that you like to use to become more aware and more present?
Well, there's the gradual approach, and then there's the instant approach. And I think that it's important to pulse between both. The gradual, consistently, maintaining a meditation practice, a mindfulness practice, understanding our own psychology, and then, it's almost like self-introduced mystical cognitive behavioral therapy, the gradual approach, understanding what pulls us away from the moment. And there's a lot of ways we can do this, heck, therapy can help. Like we were talking about plant medicine, plant medicine, meditation practice is key. Mindfulness practices are key. These are the gradual approach. This is something that we should do on a daily basis for our whole lives, the gradual approach. The instant approach is through shock. And, when we're shocked, we become embodied in the moment. That's the thing about it. Because we fall so deep into our slumber, into the hypnosis of the five senses. We become hypnotized by the information that we receive from the five senses, that we become dissociated from what's going on in the inner world. And so we're no longer aware of ourselves. We're only aware of what we are fixated upon, what the part of the world that we're turning into a fetish, whether it's work or stress or hopes or dreams or whatever it is taking us away from the moment and placing the psyche into a subconscious state, into a subconscious hypnosis. So the way to really get out of that is through being shocked. That's why, we feel so good after a roller coaster ride or a bungee jump, or whatever sort of intense thing. The best shocks are the ones that we can consciously apply that have positive side effects. So that's why ice water is so crucial for practitioners like you and I who really want to expand consciousness, push the limits of our psyches, take the subconscious and transform it into consciousness. For me, that's what it's really all about. And, breathing and cold therapy, cold shock, and heat shock as well. I think sauna helps and all of that, but really that cold shock, there's something really powerful about that, because it's not just the psyche that's getting shocked back into the present. It comes along with all these amazing side effects, health benefits, and everything.
Yeah, and so much of what you're talking about is related to the idea of hormesis, that we have been living for several decades now in almost a constant state of comfortability. At least in Western world, it seems like we have access to so many things. We have comfort around us. We have convenience around us. Everything's built around making things easier and comfortable. And that can all be a beautiful thing, but it can also weaken us as people and as a society. And for me, that's what I get so much out of something like, cold exposure and the breath work that we do, is that shock that you're talking about, that hormetic stress that we're putting on our bodies, that if we didn't have that, we'd be living in a constant state of comfort. So can you touch a little bit more on that idea of hormesis, what that's doing for us?
Oh, yeah. I mean, comfort is what puts us to sleep. It's what puts the consciousness to sleep. And when you sleep, you dream, which is the subconscious state. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're only living in that state, then there's worlds of human experience that is missing from your life. Hormesis is any stressor that defragilizes you, that takes the fragility away. It's any stressor that makes us less fragile and more strong. So any form of exercise, if you do it correctly, should be a hormetic stressor. If you're lifting weights, you're putting a hormetic stressor on your muscles, and then your muscles get larger. It's the same thing with breath work, for example, is a stressor. I mean, it takes effort, but it makes the nervous system more robust. It makes the blood alkaline. It has all of these positive benefits that come from that particular stressor. Meditation, mindset training is also a stressor. I mean, it takes a long time to learn how to sit still for long periods of time, for example, which is a key form of mind training, is stillness practice, meditative practice. And the ice, of course, it's such a stressor that it wipes out the lower stressors. It actually resets the cortisol levels. It kills inflammation. It transforms the cardiovascular system by making our vasculature more flexible and robust. So the Wim Hof Method is the key to it. They call it eustress or hormesis, hormetic training. And that is, a stressor that has positive health benefits. And that's what it's all about. It's about cracking ourselves out of the comfort zone. Because the comfort zone is a form of hypnosis. It's a trail of breadcrumbs to our psychological slumber. So we're taking that trail of breadcrumbs away, where we're removing that. And we reap there's a deeper comfort on the other side of intentional suffering. Intentional suffering. We're going to suffer either way, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing about life, is that we're going to suffer to some degree. Not always, but there's going to be suffering. But when we practice Wim Hof Method, for example, or if you exercise, these are forms of controlled suffering. But you suffer now consciously, so that later down the line, you don't suffer unconsciously, unintentionally, by getting a heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's.
In a way, you're training yourself to be able to handle situations, whether it's a difficult conversation or bad news that you receive, or you're just feeling down in the dumps, or you're feeling depressed. There's so much that's there, right? That we face on a day-to-day basis. And when you practice that stress, when you practice putting yourself into a uncomfortable position, a difficult position, like you said, doing it consciously, when you are now in that real life moment, you can take a step back and say, okay, I took a cold shower today. I stepped into the ice bath today. I did 20 minutes of breath work this morning. I got this. I don't care what this conversation is going to be, or what shit's going to be thrown at me today. Like, I already did something that is about as stressful as you can do on your body.
That's right.
It's really good training.
Oh, yeah.
I want to cover the idea of healing trauma, whether that's through breath work or an ice bath, or we have been talking about plant medicine, specifically psychedelics. What should we know about when it comes to stepping into the cold, or any of the other modalities that I talked about to heal trauma? What's happening there when we practice that to get over a breakup or divorce or loss of a loved one, or your business just went under, whatever it is, or childhood trauma, right? There's so much shit from our past that people have buried and have never let that surface. I'll let you kind of take it from there in terms of healing trauma, and what any of these methods, whether it's Wim Hof or an ice bath, or just simply breathing, or turning to something like psychedelics to heal trauma. What is your experience there?
Yeah, it's a great question. A great topic. Trauma is a form of memory, right? And memory is like trapped light. It's like our souls that get trapped in like a little shard. And, the nervous system and the cells is where the trauma gets trapped. The mind is in the body. The body is in the mind. And trauma is a form of memory that gets stuck in a closed loop in its own circuit in the nervous system. We have trillions of neurons in our brain and body. And the nervous system is, they're like circuits, like wires. Imagine a wire that's like a closed circuit, right? Well, they're open, and then experience happens, and we make these loops. We make these circuits out of experience. And a traumatic experience is a shock that gets stuck into the body, into the cells, in the neurons. And it gets stuck in a loop. And so that loop, cycles up depending on what sort of experience is happening in life that can bring that from the subconscious to the conscious. Normally we take that pain or those closed loops and we stuff them down deep in the conscious, so that the only time we experience them is in our dreams and nightmares. And we do everything we can to stay hypnotized by the comfort zone, so that those negative memories, so those traumas, so that those neural circuitry stays stuffed down, swept under the rug. Well, that's what happens when we have unconscious triggers. I'm being triggered. What you're saying is very popular amongst culture nowadays, to be like, don't say that, you're going to trigger me, you know? Well, what you're saying really is that you haven't like processed that, you know? And really it's your responsibility to not be triggered. It's actually a good thing to get triggered, because what happens is you're able to see what's inside of you, to deal with that pain. But people are so addicted to their comfort zones that they will literally try to control their environment and control people around them just so that they don't have to experience the pain, that the karma, we can say, the pain, the memory that they're responsible for. Now, obviously, you didn't choose to, I didn't choose to come from a broken home or an abusive home when I was a child. I didn't choose that. But that was the circumstances of my life. And I carry that pain with me until I choose to deal with it, until I choose to go deep into my subconscious and find where that trauma comes from and heal it and work on it, integrate with it. I'm not going to be able to, it's not total recall. I'm not trying to change, my memory of the beginning of my life. I need to keep the memory there. But the way that it circulates throughout my nervous system and the way that I respond to those memories, that's what we have. We are we have the capacity of neuroplasticity. We're able to manipulate our own, neural circuits. And when there's traumatic experience and there's traumatic neural circuits that are in there bouncing around, that gives us the ability to really work on ourselves and lean in on what it is that we should be working on. And the cold water, ice cold therapy, and deep breathing, it does a few things. It shocks us out of the hypnosis, and it gives us the ability to access our neuroplasticity. And you see this a lot when people do the deep breathing. Some people will start to process traumatic experience, and they're crying, but it's like a happy cry. It's an integrative. They're integrating with their shadow. They're integrating with their traumatic inner life, which is a powerful thing because there's so much power trapped in trauma and in pain. And so to be able to have the tools to integrate with that pain, not forget, but reprocess the way that we experience those memories, to where though that pain and that trauma becomes our greatest ally and our greatest teacher, and teaches us the deepest philosophical lessons of our own lives. Our soul gets trapped in those traumas. And when we're able to break the neural circuit, release that energy, process those emotions and that pain, and understand what's really deep down on the inside, the self that's actually trapped in that cage, we're able to reintegrate that self. And this is a very powerful experience. It's really, it's how we are able to integrate, with our subconscious and turn the subconscious into consciousness.
Wow. It's beautiful, man. It's very relatable. I sense that when I have buried or suffocated or pushed down past trauma, it becomes the narrative in my head and how I live life that, I'm a victim. This happened to me. And it's like, for example, with dating, with girlfriends and relationships, in high school, I was in a relationship and I was cheated on a few times by this one girl. And that was my first ever heartbreak. First time I was ever hurt like that by another person. And that became my narrative because I never processed that. I never processed those emotions. I buried them, and it became a victim mentality for a very long time, honestly, up until recently, the last 6 months. And when you do that, when you just push those emotions down and you let that become your narrative, that becomes, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm not good enough. She's going to hurt me. The next relationship I get in, it's going to be scary. Well, if you keep thinking like that, that's exactly what's going to happen. That energy is going to get put out to the world, into other people, into other relationships. And when you can break that open and face those fears, face that trauma, face that pain, accept it and say, okay, this is what has happened to me, but it's not who I am. It's not what's going to happen to me in the future. When you can do that, then you can become and align with who you really are. And that's what I've been working on within the last 6 months to a year. And once you realize that, wow, it's literally life-changing.
It really is. To be able to break the pattern, it's everything.
Yeah.
That's liberation. That's actually finding liberation.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is.
Super powerful. And like you said, we project so much onto the world. Our neural circuitry projects unconscious expectation on the world, and so we attract the same thing over and over and over again. That's why so many of our lives, human lives, are just like broken records. They just keep reliving the same traumatic experience. And in our comfort zone, what do? We blame the world. The world is this way. And it's a lie. Our false identities are lies. It's a false identity. And we all have them. And it's not like, there's power there. It's not a bad thing. It's just the way that it works. And the ability to transform, we all have that ability. We have, the ability to metaprogram, take advantage of our neuroplasticity, and to transform our consciousness, the way that we perceive the world and ourselves.
And a big part of that, to change that consciousness, for me, has been through meditation and breathing. I tell people that it has, because I naturally am, you mentioned the word trigger before. I get triggered pretty easily. I slip into, reaction mode and anger and defensiveness and that mentality of like, oh, you said that to me, I'm going to fight back, right? I don't know if that comes from, like, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I have 3 older brothers. So there's just like a very masculine dominant household. And so I don't know if maybe it's some of that.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm sensitive.
Yeah.
I'll just tell it to you like this. I'm sensitive, and I'm a fighter.
Yeah.
And because of, some of the traumas and some of the pain that I've experienced in life, I stick up for myself.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah.
It's really about, I think that it's a beautiful thing to be sensitive and to be a fighter.
Yeah.
But it's the trigger point. What is controlling you? What is controlling you? Is it an external stimuli that you have no control over? Is that what's pushing your buttons and pulling your strings? That's what turns us into a puppet. It's not the sensitivity, and it's not the fighter instinct. That's temperamental, and everyone has their temperament, and you should embrace your temperament because there's a lot of power there. It's what is controlling it. So when we act, are we acting or are we reacting? Are we responding or reacting? And it comes down to the space and time between the external stimuli and the internal reaction, right? Normally, what makes us triggered is external stimuli, boom, reaction. Push the button, boom, I'm a robot. And we become robotized by the external world. And that's a dangerous place, because if someone figures you out, if they know your triggers, you're their slave. And okay, maybe it's not a person, maybe it's a phenomenon, maybe it's some part of your environment, then you're the slave to the environment. Wow. Being triggered is a form of slavery. And so when we're able to separate the stimulus and the response and make more time and more space, that's what meditation is so powerful. Meditation, you learn how to sit still. And let me tell you, when you sit still for long enough, things are going to arise. You want to scratch the itch. Well, if you've decided to sit completely still for your 30 minutes of meditation, you don't scratch the itch. That itch that rises up becomes your point of meditation. A mosquito comes and lands on your face. You don't slap the mosquito. If you're really meditating, you don't slap the mosquito. You feel it. You observe it. You go into it.
Yeah.
If you're dedicated to a practice. If you're an advanced practitioner. Otherwise, you just
So how does
get the mosquito.
that translate
I get
to
it.
a real life situation outside of that meditation practice? So the example you used was mosquito comes, and if you're
Yeah.
truly in that meditative state, you're truly
Mm.
uh, embracing that state. You're not going to swat it away. So then,
That's
correct.
that's that's in the context of practice. Obviously, like I don't want the mosquito, biting my foot. If
Yeah,
I'm really
yeah,
embodied, I'm gonna go real fast, like a kung fu master. But someone says something, you know, that you find triggering. They talk about your past. Someone
yeah,
talks about your girlfriend
yeah,
in high school. They bring her name up, and they know, it's like one of your old homies from high school, and you're drinking coffee, hanging out, and they know you, and they love you, but they
yeah,
got that mischievous whatever it is. What's up with Betty? Have you seen? I heard about Betty, da 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 da, da, and they just want to watch you
yeah.
boil. People love doing that.
Mm,
We're so mischievous as humans.
it's a really good point.
Yeah. And so you observe, it's about observing and turning the consciousness inward. You feel it. You feel how those words and how those impressions are bringing something and welling something up from the past, and how, um, excuse me, and how, you know, there's this like broken record that we want to start playing. Now you have to have done some previous work. You have to know that that's a trigger, right? And the first thing I would recommend is to breathe and create space. Create space, breathe, watch, observe what
Mm,
arises, you know, and make more time between the way you respond, you know, the time between the stimulus and your
yeah.
response. That's really what it's about. Pull back. I like to speak a little bit slower when I
Yes.
start to like observe those sort of emotions, especially when I really want to react. Someone gets me on some politics or something, or
Hmm.
something I feel passionately about. Actually, don't feel that passionately about most politics, but there's some
Sure.
political, things I can get whipped up on.
Yeah.
When people are talking about human rights, especially, I feel very strongly about human rights and that what humans are entitled to, what children are entitled to in this world, and sometimes people say the darndest things,
Mm.
about human life, and I want to fight. But you know, really, what I want
Mm.
is for consciousness to grow and to be able to contribute to you know you know
Mm.
the
Yeah.
growth of conscious intelligence. And me snapping at someone over human rights in a conversation doesn't lead to any. I mean, I'm probably just going to dig them deeper into their position first of all, because they just want to fight. And when two people are fighting, most likely they're not listening to each other. In which case, you've already won the battle. You've lost the battle. Excuse me. You're not going to change anybody's mind, you know, by barking and territory.
And what a true and applicable subject for today's world, especially in America, where everything seems to be so divided, especially politically, and people have their opinions. And it seems like we're getting to a spot now where people don't know, or they aren't willing to listen. We're not willing to listen to the other side or have empathy and compassion, and that gets dangerous when you come into a conversation saying, this is it, this is my way, and this is how it is, I'm going to put up this wall, and anything else you have to say doesn't apply to me. It gets very dangerous.
It is. We've forgotten how to listen and how to observe. In our psychological hypnosis,
Hmm.
we're just projecting our our inner chaos onto the world.
Yeah. Wow.
Ah,
How true.
and we have to first start by observing that in the moment. When you can observe that in the moment, then just through observing it, your observation, the ability to perceive, the ability to be aware, will start to outweigh the thing that we're observing, which is this projector of trauma onto the world. And as we observe the projector, as we observe, I call it the three brains, the intellect, the emotion, the instinct, that has all of these traumas and all of these thoughts and moods and all of, data and all the stuff from the past that we're just projecting onto the world consciously. If you can observe that, then the power of observation will outweigh, at some point, it will outweigh the projector. And now you're the observer and not the objector.
Yeah.
And not the projector, excuse me. And when you're the observer and not the projector, now you're in a state where you can actually perceive what's going on objectively. And you're the listener, you're the watcher. That is consciousness. Consciousness is the ability to perceive, the ability to be aware. So now you have just put your psyche you've weighted the awareness by watching what's on the inside, by watching the egos, the crazy egos that are running around the chaotic house of the psyche. But then when you do that, the consciousness gets exercised. Then you can really listen to people.
Yeah.
And you can really listen to the world. The greatest yogi of Tibet, his name was Milarepa. He was a great Dumo yogi. He was a Repa. He would go in the snows in his loincloth and, do his breathing techniques and became this great master. But you always see him in pictures. His mudra, a mudra is like an asana, a mudra is like a position that the bodhisattva takes. And his mudra is always like this. You see Milarepa sitting, listening.
Wow. I love that. What is the best method for you to become more of an observer and less of a projector? Is that meditation? Is it breathwork? Is it something else? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
It's something else. Excuse me. It's something else. It's like psychology, esoteric psychology. So it's the ability to self-observe, which takes a lot of practice. It's a form. They call it mindfulness, but people really don't know what that means in the West usually. I call it self-observation. So the ability to understand the psyche in the sense that, psyche means consciousness or soul. And in the human machine, it is generally, lives in the intellect, emotions, instinct, motor, and sexual impulses. And to be able to observe those five centers, motor, instinct, and sexual impulses, we usually wrap up into a brain. So we call it the three brains or the five centers, depending on how we want to slice and dice it. And so being able to observe what's happening on the inside while simultaneously being aware of the information that we're receiving from the five senses, that's really it. And being able to do that for long periods of time, continuity, we turn it into a continuous practice, and then integration takes place. Self-remembering, the remembering of the psyche. Remember, not remembering like it's a memory, but remembering like taking all the different members and putting them all together. We can call it self-integration or consciousness integration. It comes from the continuity of self-observation. So meditation helps, cold water helps, breathing certainly helps, but having the tools to turn the consciousness on in the moment and doing that continuously in an unbroken chain, that's really what it comes down to. It's esoteric psychology.
I love that. You talked about the psyche, and the root word, or the beginning part of the word psychedelics is psyche. So I'd love to pivot and talk about plant medicine and psychedelics, because I know that's a shared passion of ours. Can you tell us more about how plant medicine has played a role in your life what it
Oh yeah.
has done for you, and what you're most excited about right now in that space.
Yeah, so I was self-medicating as a teenager. I'm from Long Beach, California. you know. So Long Beach, growing up in Long Beach in the '90s, um, we we have a cultural relationship with marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
It's super important to the Long Beach boys in the '90s. I came of age, when Sublime, who were from Long Beach, and Snoop Dogg, who's from Long Beach, these guys were very popular and making on the world stage, and so we were very proud of that. Marijuana culture and psychedelic culture, is was very important to us growing up,
Mm-hmm.
and especially for me because I was self-medicating with it. It was a wonderful thing for me to do. I was too young, developmentally probably to do those, but I don't think that it was. I didn't do it to such a degree to where it did damage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think most of the time it does. Depending on what you're taking and what you're experimenting.
Mm-hmm.
I think experimentation with psychedelics is not just an important part of culture, but it's the culture that will deconstruct the. I don't even know if you want to call it Western culture, because I don't think that there is a lot of West. I mean, the American culture right now is like corporate culture.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is mass produced, and people, we identify with this mass produced. I don't even know what you want to call it. I think culture comes from art and psychedelia and experimentation, because these facets of life take real courage. Psychedelia and psychedelic experimentation is not for the weak-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for where we say if you're scared you go to church. It's an old saying. Psychedelia and being a psychonaut. I like the term psychonaut.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like astronaut, but with the psyche.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of traveling to outer space, you're traveling to inner space. And inner space is just as vast, maybe more vast than outer space. There's so much we don't even know about the physical brain, and by we I mean the scientists, that we listen to.
Yeah.
I just was watching this neuroscientist who was basically saying, that the LSD, the shape of the molecule is very similar to the shape of serotonin, but it fits into the serotonin receptors in the brain even tighter than serotonin does. And they don't even know why, because they don't know anything about the brain, actually. They just know, like, a little bit about the brain.
It's wild.
There's so much they don't know. I think that psychedelic experimentation is incredibly powerful. It taps us into our shamanic roots, which is something that's in our genes, our ancestry. For thousands of years, we were eating mushrooms, and in Greece, you had the Kykeon, I think that's how you pronounce it, the rites of Eleusis, which was basically the Burning Man of Greece. And they would go for a week or whatever and partake of fermented rye, which is where you get basically what you get LSD from. You had the soma in the Bhagavad Gita in ancient India, which was most likely some form of amanita mushroom. Ayahuasca in ancient Amazonian cultures, which those lineages are still alive today. I've experimented, and I experiment with all of these sacred substances, and I take them both ceremonially and in sacred fashion and recreationally. I think it's important to do both. That's my culture. That's where I'm from. I do it with I experiment with those substances with breathwork and meditation and movement and trance-like states, manipulating my own trance-like states. The shaman, the guru is on the inside. It's the consciousness. And it's also on the outside in the sense of having a conscious community around us that we can ask and look to and, find out their heuristics. Like what did you do? How does it work? What should I take? What should I try? I love microdosing. I get my microdoses from Shaman Lab, which you can find on Instagram, shaman.lab. And they do psilocybin microdoses, 200 milligrams, 30 per bottle. And I love to pop one or two of those, once, 1 to 3 times a week. I'll take them depending on what's going on and how I feel. Get a little uptake in the serotonin. It's 100% natural medicine. It's not an isolated pharmaceutical molecule, which I'm not really into so much. I think it's fine if people want to do that, but the problem is that industry has the game backwards. I'm really into full spectrum plant and mushroom medicine. Being able to get the full property of the living substance, especially mushrooms. They're dried, but they're still alive. You have these spores and the parts of the mushroom that contain this like life to them. And so when I take even a microdose, I connect to the microdose with intention, to cultivate what science would call a placebo effect. I would call it metaprogramming. So I metaprogram with the plant. And then the plant medicine, fits into my neurology in such a way that it takes my consciousness exactly where I want to go. It's like shooting an arrow to a target with my consciousness.
Can you talk a little bit more about metaprogramming, what that is, and how would you define that to be different than placebo effect?
Well, metaprogramming is more complete. Placebo effect is basically, you kind of like believe your way into a state. So you think the medicine is going to work, and then the medicine is working, Or another placebo effect, like you were saying, is we're in our traumas, we see the world through a certain pattern, and then we attract that to ourselves. That's like a form of placebo effect in a way. Metaprogramming is the ability to use your own consciousness, and there's like this state that you want to reach and that you want to be in, this state of consciousness, and you metaprogram your way there. So you take advantage of your own neuroplasticity and maybe some plant medicine, or maybe the cold water, or breathing, or all of the above, meditation. And you use those tools in order to cultivate a state of consciousness according to your vision, right? Because there's infinite states of consciousness. A lot of the time, like when I'm talking Wim Hof Method, you'll hear me say sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, as if there's only two states. Completely bullshit. I mean, it's not bullshit in the sense that those are there, but those are categorizations of some of the states that we can be in, right? It's an oversimplification. Thank you, science, for that oversimplification, because, we can use the language, but truly there's infinite states of consciousness, infinite. And you can get there by projecting your consciousness there. And sometimes to get there, you have to deal with trauma. Sometimes to get there, you have to deal with the fucked up past. Sometimes to get there, you may need a little plant medicine, or maybe even a little LSD, to inspire. You want to be inspired, for your art, or for your business, or for your life, what you're doing in your life. Sometimes you need extra inspiration. And going into a psychedelic state, or into a trance-like state, or, these are all very powerful states that have their neuroplastic potential, right? So, it's a practice. For me, it's a lifelong practice. And it's like, I think it's the birthright of the human soul. And by soul, I just mean psychic consciousness. I don't think that the soul is like, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it's like, it's not like a person. It's not like a body. It's light. It's intelligent light.
Yeah. I love that concept of going into things with more intentionality. It's very similar with, for me with microdosing, taking a few minutes to journal and write out what outcomes I want to get out of it for the day or for the week. You could say the same thing for goal setting or just having a to-do list, or it's that practice of intentionality without, rather than going into it with no intentionality and just kind of doing it. You can do that, but if you really want to get more out of it, for me, in my experience, is having that thoughtful
Mm.
intentionality. And I get so much more out of a practice, whether that's microdosing or breathing. You know, there's been several days where I'm just like super stressed, or days where you just feel down on yourself, or you're actually going through a difficult time. You're actually going through heartbreak or whatever it may be, and saying, I'm going to lay down and I'm going to breathe my way through
Mm.
this. And when you do that with that intentionality, it's so much more powerful. With microdosing, so for me, in terms of benefits and what I've gotten out of it, I feel, and by the way, somebody just asked me the other day where I'm at in terms of how I'm doing, how I feel about myself, my confidence level. And I told them, I feel more in tune with myself now than I ever have before. I feel more confident. My self-love is at a higher level than it's ever been. And I attribute a lot of that to, yes, different self-care practices, but I attribute that to the microdosing. And it's helped me step into my true self, I believe. I've become more creative. I've become more productive. I've become more aware. We've talked a lot about awareness today, you know, self-awareness, and aware of my surroundings and my relationships and the conversations that I have. So those are just, I mean, that's just a short list of so many things I've gotten out of it. I have not had experience with larger doses outside of, you could consider mini doses, which there, for me, the biggest things is just enhanced creativity and more presence and more joy and bliss and happiness in my life. But I have not had an experience of a
Heroic
larger dose, a
dose.
mega
Yeah.
dose, hero dose, however you want to call it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on your experience with benefits from microdosing or larger
Yeah.
doses.
Well, benefits from microdosing is enhanced cognition. It's a neurotropic. So you're going to have clearer mind, clear brain, and more focused thoughts, and an
Mm-hmm.
upwelling of well-being, which is, the serotonin. So, and again, going into something willingly with intentionality is so different than doing something mechanically, where you just passively take a pill and just sort of let the molecules do their thing. That's a very robotic way of doing something. Like just sort of take what they give you, and just sort of hope it works. Heroic dose is very powerful. A heroic dose can take you into very dark places where you're just dealing with your trauma in your own inner hell, or it can take you to very super conscious galactic experiences where I've been in contact with higher beings, and I've received information that applied to my life that I don't think I could have gotten anywhere else. And it's like, did I get that? Was that part of me that was delivering that information, or was that from some, you know, external place? I still don't know. I have my theories and stuff like that, but it works. And I've received, great messages, downloads. Also, just it's fun for me. I think it's just a wonderful thing to be able to break out of the humdrum reality that we're in and
Mm.
experience a multidimensional universe. I believe that in those states, especially in those heroic doses, we have switched on neural circuitry that connects the consciousness, that opens the consciousness to be able to perceive the like the ultra dimensions, like the ultra waves of
Mm.
light. And I think that's why it helps cure depression. That's why it's becoming legalized. They've done all these tests, and during this quote unquote psychedelic renaissance, and they're like, oh, you'll see all these articles. It's crazy. MDMA helps cure depression. Magic mushrooms
Mm.
help cure depression. LSD helps cure depression. Ketamine helps cure depression. Well, we could just simply say all psychedelic states helps cure depression. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Because depression is when you get stuck in this material plane and there's no way out. All you have is your trauma and your fucked up memories. Well, who wouldn't be depressed in this square world of straight lines? Who wouldn't be depressed here? Maybe only robots. It's, that's just being stuck in one plane of consciousness in this third dimension. That's like prison. When you know deep down that the human consciousness was made to experience myriad dimensions, colorful places, things that you couldn't even imagine on your own, and you're there. You're teleported to those places. It's surrounding you, maybe for hours and hours. It's amazing. It's the playground of the psyche. It's like the Garden of Eden. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's, being able to tap into that, whether by meditation or breath work and ice baths and Wim Hof Method, my deepest psychedelic experiences I've ever had was with breath work and no external substance. And I have
Super interesting.
And I have done hundreds, if not thousands, of heroic doses of all sorts of psychedelic substances. I've done all the LSD in the world. I've done all the crazy amounts of mushrooms. I've done ayahuasca several times in ceremonies. All the different types of DMT, ketamine. I'm an experimenter. I'm a psychonaut, and the deepest I have ever gone is in 1 hour session of breathwork.
Mm. It's so interesting you said that, because as I just had mentioned, I have not done a heroic dose, but I have had a few. I would classify them as mini doses. But even then, the most psychedelic state of mind I've been in was through breath work. It was the first Wim Hof Method workshop I've ever attended. It's probably not as intense as your 1 hour long breath session that you were talking about, but it was still about 20 minutes of breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time I had experienced that in a group setting. So I'd been practicing the Wim Hof breathing on my own months leading up to this workshop. And having that in a group setting with a guide to facilitate that breathing. And you just lay there and just let go, and you just listen to that instructor guide you through that experience. And by that third or fourth round of the deep breathing, it was an experience like I've never had before. Just feeling so light and tingly, and seeing colors, seeing purples and greens, and it was all natural. It's what Wim says, get high on your own supply. It's remarkable stuff, the fact that we can do that naturally.
It's amazing. We can tap into the deepest states just with our own mechanism, what we came here with. And that's the thing about it. It's all already there. And that's really what psychedelics should teach us. What you're experiencing is you. It's not the drug. You're not experiencing LSD. You don't paint the world in LSD. It's just an antagonist.
Yeah.
It just triggers something.
Yeah. I think you mentioned earlier that you spent your 20s. Do you say you're agnostic or atheist? Did I hear that correctly?
No, Gnostic.
Oh, Gnostic. Okay. I thought I heard you said agnostic, and I was like, that's interesting, because it sounds like you're a very spiritual guy. And I was wondering if...
I have a level of... There's a side of me that is agnostic. Because I humbly don't know, more than I have more not knowing than I have knowing. And it will always, what we don't know will always be vastly, infinitely more than what we do know.
Yeah.
I'm like a Gnostic and an agnostic.
Yeah.
Because what I do know, Gnostic comes from gnosis, the root word gnosis, which means experiential knowledge. And that was the mystery schools, 2,000 years ago on the Silk Road. They were called the Gnostics. There are many different mystery schools that term applied to. those were ancient schools of initiation, initiatic schools, where through using ritual technology, the initiates were brought through rites and would do practices that would incorporate meditation, sometimes plant work, and ritual and other things in order to stimulate higher states of consciousness. That when you experience those higher states of consciousness, it becomes a form of knowing. That form of knowing is gnosis. So the Gnostic is the one that's dedicated towards cultivating that form of knowing. Not intellectual knowing, the kind of knowing that you get from studying science or reading books, but the form of knowing through your conscious experience. That's what Gnostic or Gnosis means. But I'm also an agnostic in the sense that I humbly respect the fact that there's so much I'll never know as a human.
Right. Well, I think that's what trust and faith is all about, in terms of you have that Gnostic experience of that you were describing, and there's also a part of you that's agnostic, that we don't truly know in terms of physical evidence. But through our experiences that we have, we do know. Anything else on plant medicine or psychedelics that you wanted to cover? Anything that you're excited about?
I think it's great. It's a form of hormetic stressor, depending on how you do it. The heroic doses are. And I think that it's a powerful thing to experiment with. Do it safely. That form of experimentation, I think, brings about like courage, like conscious courage.
Wow.
To be a psychonaut, to be a traveler of the inner worlds.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with Wim Hof Method as well, and meditation. When you really push to it, it takes a certain amount of courage to be able to go into those parts of yourself. But the payoff is, I will call it heaven.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great way.
I can bring the experiences that I've had, from the heroic doses especially, I can bring those states of consciousness. I could cultivate them without taking it, because I remember what they feel like. And so I could integrate some super conscious experiences that I've had in a moment, and I can access them without the plant medicine.
Yeah.
Because I know what it feels like. I've been there. And it's in me. It's not in the mushroom. It's in me.
It's such a beautiful way of putting it. I feel like you could say that almost about any altered state of consciousness, whether that's meditation or the breath work, or plant medicine. When you have that experience at that deep of a level, it becomes a part of you. And when you are now on the outside world, you don't have to rely on that modality or that plant or whatever it may be. It's in you now, and you can go out and live it on a day-to-day basis.
That's right.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Right.
Cool, man.
And same with, the states that we cultivate in Wim Hof Method. It's the same thing. Access. Once you tap in, you leave a trail of breadcrumbs, and you keep practicing, and you keep practicing, and at a certain point, you could just tap into it.
It's so cool. It's so powerful. Cool, Reed. Before we get to our last question here, where can people learn more about you? I know you're on Instagram and other places. Where would you like to send people to learn more?
Yeah, you could find me on Instagram. I don't post that much, but I gotta get better at posting. But I definitely put up, if you go to the link in my bio, you could find when my workshop dates are. I do workshops in mostly in Long Beach, California, and I do some in Seattle. I might start doing some in Austin and some other places as well. I also do private workshops. So, businesses sometimes will book me. I do corporate stuff. Nice. And, or if someone has a group of, that wants to learn, you can always hit me up, and we'll find a date where I'll show up, and we can do Wim Hof Method, meditation, movement, stillness, breathing, the whole thing, plant medicine. So, Instagram is a good place, Reed Wasser. And yeah, I guess that's the main place.
I love that. I'll have that linked up too in show notes. People can access all of your links. My last question for you, Reed, is why do all of this? Why focus on self-care why get in touch with our breath and do things like hormetic stress of cold exposure and plant
Yeah.
medicine? Why? Who do you want to impact the most with the work that you're doing?
Well, I'm a self healer, and I looked for answers at a young age because of, really out of
Mm.
pain. Um, and it works. For me, it works. I attribute all of the, like all of the positive things in my life come from this inner work that I
Mm.
do, that I stack up. The ability to access higher states of consciousness, all of that comes from the impulse to want to heal, to find an answer. And um, I think that when we start to heal, it naturally produces an amount of compassion where we want to offer it to those around us as well. Because imagine if everyone around us is happy. Imagine what kind of world we'll be in. I mean, it's almost okay. I mean, it's almost like out of selfish. Even consider it out of like selfish
Mm-hmm.
interest. When you offer people the keys to their own, integration and happiness, and you're sharing that, that creates a different environment. The people around you, um, your life
Mm.
changes. So, for me, it's really about compassion and the drive and the will to expand consciousness, so that we can heal and turn this world into a
Mm.
heavenly place,
Mm.
heaven on earth.
I love that, brother.
Everyone is their own master. Everyone is the guru is deep on the
Mm.
inside. It's not me. It's not Wim Hof. It's not. It's not the ancient masters that we read about in scripture. Your guru, your teacher, your master is
Mm.
inside of you, and we're all here together to just remind each other of that, and to have the courage to experiment with finding a way back to learn at the feet of that master. And once we figure out something that works, we have to offer it to those around us. Because once everyone is learning from the feet of their own master, the world is a very, very different place. And this world needs to be we need to change things.
100%. 100%. I love that, man. It's I couldn't agree more. We are living in a world that is hurting, and we need healing more now more than ever. And I've said that myself several times, that inner work that you and I do, and so many others that are in our space, in our community, it does have the power to change the world. Like you said, imagine if everybody did some breath work every day, if they stepped into a cold shower, if they
Yeah.
meditated, if it's right for them, explored with plant medicine. It's that aware. It's what we've been talking about. It's that self-awareness and self-love. And when you get that right, if you have a whole world of people that love themselves, there's no room for hate. There's no room for anger. There's no room for stress. It's a beautiful world, and like you said, it's heaven on earth. And I think that's a shared goal of both of ours. And I appreciate that about you.
Yeah, man.
Love that.
All right. We're on
All
the
right,
same
brother.
team here.
That's right. That's right. We're building an army. Cool,
Right.
man. Well, Reed, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, your knowledge. I always love hearing what you have to say. This could have been a 3-hour Joe Rogan style podcast if we wanted, but
Yeah.
I
Next time.
appreciate you. Yeah, next time. I love
Sure.
that. All right, man. Well,
Sure.
thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much for having me on, man. It's been a pleasure.
Of
It's great
course.
to see you on here, man.
Yeah, likewise.
All right.
All right, man.
Talk
You
to
have a great day.
you.